everyone, we're the Final Bosses, and today we're going to be talking about the Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Final Fantasy 7 for the original PlayStation, one of my favorite games.
It's one of mine too, so this game has a huge pedigree to live up to.
Yeah, it does. But it's also trying to be its own thing with a huge change to combat, as well as being episodic, with the first episode only being set in Midgar.
And you see, that actually worries me a little bit. It worries me that the game will be lackluster, and also maybe too fast-paced.
Yeah, it does me too, but without further ado, let's fight.
Let's start off with our main protagonist, Cloud. Cloud starts off as a cocky, uncaring, yet quiet individual, and he's kind of a hard main character to get behind.
Fortunately, the game gives us some early flashbacks to explain why Cloud is the way he is, and to make us care about him more. And to older fans, you get to see some iconic, important scenes early on.
As the story goes on, Cloud does change and grow, mostly thanks to the side characters that are around him. Speaking of, this is where Final Fantasy VII Remake really shines. In the original game, it does a great job at endearing us to Aerith, but doesn't really give the other characters great character development until later on.
However, the game does build up the characters really well, to a point where even the side characters feel like they have their own personality and lives that don't revolve around the main character, and that's a huge improvement from the original game.
We also get introduced to several new characters that were not in the original game. These characters get a really good chance to shine in chapters 8 and 9. Altogether, the game makes you feel for all the characters involved, and it really helps tell the story, especially when things get dark.
Again, keeping the spoiler free, the game balances emotion really well, and as Joe said, the story does get dark. And though a dark story doesn't necessarily equal a great story, our own world can be dark. And so having a story that pulls from that can make it more relatable.
As relatable as a dude carrying a massive sword casting magic at a fireball with eyes can be. But really, the story carries some heavy subject matter with it. Corrupt megabusinesses, planet pollution, the price of freedom, and even darker subject matter.
The story is mostly well-paced, and we say mostly because trying to take what is 10 hours of content that the original Midgar was and stretch it out to 40 hours has its problems. Sometimes you're in combat too long, but then other times you can't wait until the game actually lets you have something to hit. The pacing is positive overall, though there is no one dreaded chapter like there was in Final Fantasy 15.
You said the magic word, combat. Square isn't always the best at combat. Final Fantasy XV's combat was a bit divisive, and Kingdom Hearts 3 felt floaty to a lot of people. So where does Final Fantasy VII Remake lie? Well, that's hard to explain. If you're a fan of action combat, you're going to feel like it's a little too clunky. And if you're the classic turn-based RPG, you're going to feel like it's overwhelming. However, Final Fantasy VII Remake falls into a sweet spot in between them. In a boss fight starting off with Cloud, I'd go in for an attack and build up my ATB bars until I can pull off a big ability. That way the boss turns to me and I have its attention. I quickly then switch over to Tifa, and that way I'm doing a lot of damage to the rear of the enemy while building up her ATB bar to unleash some more abilities. Once that boss has Tifa's attention, I then switch over to Barret, who is built tanky, and I start unleashing heavy damage to the boss while also keeping my party healed. And of course, once the boss switches to Barret, I switch back to Cloud, and I'm doing a lot more damage. And this is a complex combat system because you got to think about things like staggering and what material you have equipped.
Yeah, the combat can be a learning curve, and I don't think that everyone will like it, but overall I do think it's a great balance of old school and new school action combat. The new upgrade system in Final Fantasy VII is great for helping you with combat. As you level, each weapon earns AP, and you can use that AP to upgrade the weapon's attack, defense, or magic. You can even upgrade its damage with certain materia. And yes, materia is back, and just as good. Each materia lets you add magic, increases your combat, or gives you a passive ability. It even lets you summon powerful creatures to help you fight for a short time.
I'm going to sum up a few of the other features real quick. Limit breaks are back, and just like in the original game, you build that up in battle. And yes, each character has more than one. There are a fair amount of side quests in the game. They give you great items, but they also help build the world and the characters around you. But more importantly, if you're doing all those side quests, you actually get better and more main story content, so it's definitely worth doing those side missions. There's also a Coliseum in the game that provides some great additional content, as well as there's a fantastic end game, but I don't really want to spoil for you what's all in the end game.
Well, after all is said and done, The Final Fantasy VII Remake has something for both new and old fans.
And while it doesn't tell the full story, it does tell a full story, and it's definitely worth the playthrough. That's why we're giving it a rating of 9.2 out of 10.
A near perfect experience with a few flaws, keeping it from being the ideal remake. But as always,
We have been
the final bosses.